I never imagined I'd hear something like that about Jack. Not from his best friend, not from anyone. If you had asked me yesterday what I thought I knew about my husband, I would have said I knew everything there was to know. 32 years of marriage, decades of shared moments, our children grown, our life built from the ground up. I thought I had it all figured out. But in that one brief conversation, everything I believed about Jack, everything I thought I knew about him, was thrown into question. And it all started with a phone call from Tom, his best friend, a man who had been a constant presence in our lives. He was the one who knew Jack better than anyone else, or so I thought. I had been standing in the kitchen, the sun barely peeking through the window as the morning mist lifted from the yard. A quiet Saturday morning, the kind of stillness that makes you believe everything is as it should be. I was sipping my tea, watching the leaves in the garden flutter in the breeze. I could hear the clock ticking in the background, and for a moment, everything felt right, peaceful, simple. The phone ringing broke that silence, its shrill sound pulling me from my thoughts. It was Tom. A call from Jack's best friend at this time of the morning was unusual. I set my mug down, feeling an inexplicable flutter in my chest. I answered, "Hey, Tom, what's up?" There was a pause on the other end, a pause that lasted too long. "Sarah." Tom's voice sounded different, too serious. I could hear a hesitation in his words, something I couldn't quite place, and suddenly my stomach twisted, a subtle unease creeping up on me. "I think we need to talk," he finally said, his voice laced with something I couldn't decipher. My heart skipped a beat. "Is everything okay?" I asked, instinctively bracing myself for something that felt off. Tom exhaled slowly, and I could hear the strain in his breath. "It's about Jack," he said, his words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. "There's something I think you should know." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" The silence stretched on again. Then Tom spoke, and the words he said were nothing I could have ever anticipated. "Jack hasn't been honest with you about who he really is." A chill swept through me. My fingers tightened around the phone, my pulse quickening as I sat down at the kitchen table. My head was spinning with 1,000 questions. What was he talking about? What could Jack possibly be hiding from me? And why had Tom waited this long to say anything? I tried to steady my breath, my voice shaking. "What do you mean, Tom? Who is he?" And that's when Tom's words shifted everything. I sat there, holding the phone in my trembling hands, still trying to make sense of what Tom had said. Jack hasn't been honest with me about who he really is. The words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over like a bad song on a loop. My heart pounded in my chest, and all I could hear was the sound of my breath as it quickened, sharp and shallow. "Tom," I whispered, barely hearing my own voice. "What do you mean? What is the secret he's been hiding?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel the weight of Tom's hesitation. I wanted to scream at him to just say it, to tell me the truth, whatever it was. But I knew better than to push him too hard. I could hear him breathing on the other side, struggling with whatever it was he was about to say. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice quiet and heavy. "I don't want to cause any problems, but I can't keep quiet anymore. You need to know the truth." My hands were slick with sweat as I gripped the phone harder, the edge of the table biting into my palms. I felt like I was floating outside of my body, like none of this was real. But the knot in my stomach, the cold sweat on my neck, it was real. "What truth, Tom?" I demanded, my voice shaky but determined to get answers. "What has Jack been hiding?" Tom sighed deeply, and I could hear the exhaustion in his breath. He sounded like a man who had been carrying something for far too long, something that was starting to suffocate him. Sarah, I don't know how else to say this, but Jack has been living with a secret, a part of himself he's never shared with you. And it's something he's been struggling with for a long time. I stood up, my legs unsteady as the words hit me. A secret? A part of himself he never shared with me? I could feel the room closing in around me, the walls pressing tighter as if they were closing off the air. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it didn't help. The air felt thick with something heavy, something I wasn't ready to face. I don't understand, I said, my voice cracking as I tried to force the words out. Why didn't he tell me? Why would he keep something like that from me? Tom was quiet for a long moment, as if he were trying to find the right words, or maybe just finding the courage to speak. He was afraid, Sarah, afraid of losing you, afraid of how you would react. But more than that, he was afraid of facing it himself, afraid of the truth. And honestly, I don't think he even knows how to deal with it. Fear. That's the word that stood out, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Jack had been afraid of losing me, afraid of confronting whatever it was that had been eating away at him. I could feel the sharp edge of something cold in my chest, and the ache started to spread through me. Fear. It was such a small word, but it was the one thing that seemed to explain everything. The fear that had kept Jack from telling me whatever this truth was. The fear that had kept him locked in his own silence all these years. Tom, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I need you to tell me, what's the secret? There was another pause, and when Tom spoke again, his voice trembled, just the slightest bit. He's been hiding his feelings, Sarah. His real feelings. And it's been tearing him apart. I blinked, not sure if I had heard him correctly. What do you mean, his real feelings? Tom exhaled slowly, his words coming out in a rush. Jack has been struggling with something inside of him. Something he hasn't been able to admit, even to himself. It's not about you, Sarah. It's about who he is, who he's been all along, and how he's been pretending to be someone he's not. I felt my heart stop. Pretending to be someone he's not? All this time I had thought I knew Jack, thought we had a connection, a deep, unshakable bond. We had built a life together. We had shared everything. Or so I thought. Sarah, you need to understand, Tom said, his voice lowering to almost a whisper. He's been living in fear of facing this part of himself, and for years he's kept it buried. He never told you because he was afraid that you wouldn't understand, that you'd leave him. But it's been destroying him. I was no longer standing. I was sinking, my knees hitting the floor as the weight of Tom's words crashed into me. Jack, my Jack, had been hiding a part of himself. Something so fundamental that it had shaped everything about him, and I had never known. I had never suspected. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice distant, as if it wasn't really mine. Why didn't he tell me? Tom sighed again, and his voice softened. Because I can't keep watching him destroy himself, Sarah. He loves you. I know that much. But he doesn't know how to be honest about who he really is. The tears started to well up, and I didn't try to stop them. How could I? How could I not cry when the man I had shared my life with, my partner, my love, had been living in a prison of his own making? I need to talk to him, I said, my voice breaking. Tom was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his words were slow and heavy. I think you do. And just like that, the weight of the truth was on my shoulders. The silence of the house, the quiet of the morning, had vanished. The only sound I could hear was my own heartbeat, racing, pounding in my ears. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire world had just shifted. The truth, Tom's words, kept echoing in my head. I hadn't even gotten the full story yet, but it didn't matter. The weight of it was already too heavy. Jack hadn't been honest with me, not about who he was, not about the struggles he'd been hiding. I felt like I was floating in a haze, unable to grab hold of anything solid. Everything felt distant, blurred, like I was watching my life from the outside. I barely registered the passage of time as I sat there in the kitchen, lost in thought. The room seemed colder than before. The sun that had been filtering in through the windows now felt too bright, too harsh. I could see the autumn leaves still scattered across the yard, but they seemed like part of another life. A life I no longer recognized. When the sound of the front door opening reached my ears, I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It was Jack. I knew it was him before I even heard the faint shuffle of his shoes on the floor. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky as I moved toward the living room. I didn't know what to do, how to act. He had no idea what I knew. How was I supposed to face him? How could I look at him the same way after what Tom had told me? The sound of his footsteps grew closer, and I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. When I saw him walk through the door, his face broke into that familiar, worn smile, the one that had always made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, dropping his keys onto the table and kicking off his shoes. I forced myself to smile, but it felt strained, like my face didn't quite remember how. I had memorized every detail of his face over the years. His laugh lines, the way his hair fell just slightly over his forehead, the small crease in his brow when he was deep in thought. But now I was looking at him differently, searching for something I had never thought to look for before. "Jack," I said, my voice sounding too soft, too uncertain. "We need to talk." His smile faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern flickering in his eyes. I motioned for him to sit at the kitchen table, my stomach twisting in knots. I didn't know how to start. How could I just ask him? How could I lay everything out in front of him and ask for the truth? The truth that I wasn't even sure I was ready to hear. He hesitated, a shadow crossing his face. For a moment, I thought he might say something else, but instead he nodded, his eyes scanning my face for any sign of what was coming. He knew. Not exactly what, but he knew. I could see it in the way he tensed, in the way his shoulders seemed to rise slightly, as if bracing himself for something. "Sit down, Jack," I said, a little firmer now. "Please." He sat, his face unreadable, and I took my seat across from him. My hands were trembling, and I clutched them tightly together, trying to ground myself. I had to do this. I couldn't let this hang over us anymore. I needed the truth, no matter how hard it was to face. "Mark called me," I said, keeping my voice even, though my heart was racing. The words felt like they were tearing at the back of my throat, but I forced myself to say them. "He told me everything." Jack's reaction was immediate. His jaw tightened, and his hands balled into fists on the table. For the first time in a long time, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared down at the surface of the table, his fingers digging into the wood. I could see the tension in his whole body, in the way his muscles were stiff, like he was preparing for something much worse than he could handle. "I see," he whispered, his voice so quiet I could barely hear him. I leaned forward, searching his face for any sign of what he was thinking. His lips parted, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, and my heart pounded harder with every second. I needed him to speak. I needed him to tell me what Mark had told me wasn't true. "Jack," I whispered, unable to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Is it true?" He exhaled slowly, and for the first time I saw the raw emotion in his eyes, fear, guilt, and something else that I couldn't name. His eyes flickered, darting away for just a moment, But when he finally lifted them to mine, I saw it. The truth, hidden behind years of silence, was there. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking with the weight of it. "It's true." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the room tilt beneath me, the ground beneath my feet shifting, as if the world itself was crumbling. Jack, the man I had spent my life with, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, he had been hiding this from me. For how long? How long had he been carrying this secret, this part of himself that he couldn't share with me? I felt my breath catch in my throat. My mind raced, and I couldn't seem to form a coherent thought. I just stared at him, searching for any sign that this was some kind of mistake. But there was no mistaking the look in his eyes. There was no doubt in my mind now. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign, coming from my lips, as if I didn't even recognize myself. Jack's face crumpled, his shoulders shaking as he buried his face in his hands. I had never seen him like this. Not once in all the years we'd been together. He had always been the strong one, the one who held me when I cried, the one who made me laugh when I thought I couldn't. "I never wanted you to find out like this," he choked out. "I never wanted to hurt you." I reached across the table, my hand trembling as I placed it over his. For a moment, I just held it there, trying to offer him some kind of comfort. But it didn't feel right. Nothing felt right anymore. "How long?" I asked softly, the question hanging between us like an unbearable weight. Jack let out a broken laugh, and my heart cracked just a little more. "Forever," he said, his voice barely audible. Forever. It felt like a lifetime ago that we had built this life together. But in that one word, I realized just how much had been hidden, buried beneath the surface. How could we ever go back to what we were? Could we? The silence between us was thick, filled with everything we wanted to say, but didn't know how to. And as I sat there, holding his hand, I realized that everything had changed. We weren't the same people we had been just a few moments ago. The silence between us felt unbearable. I could still feel the warmth of Jack's hand beneath mine, but it was different now, like it no longer belonged to the same man I had spent so many years with. His face, once so familiar, now seemed distant, as if a veil had dropped between us, obscuring the man I thought I knew. I kept replaying his words in my mind. "It's true, I've been hiding this from you." My stomach twisted with the sharp ache of betrayal, but there was something else mixed in: confusion, hurt, and a desperate, gnawing need for answers. How could this happen? How could Jack, my husband, keep something so fundamental from me for so long? How could he keep a part of himself hidden away, locked up without ever telling me? My mind kept circling around it, trying to make sense of something that felt so wrong. We've been married for over 30 years. How had we reached this point where Jack was sitting across from me, his face etched with guilt, and I was wondering if I truly knew him at all? I tried to steady my breath, but it was impossible. The weight of everything was too much, and the room, it felt smaller, the walls closing in as if suffocating under the pressure of unspoken truths. I had spent years trusting Jack with everything: my heart, my dreams, my fears. And now, all of that seemed to be unraveling in front of me. "Jack," I whispered, my voice cracking with the rawness of it all. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" The question hung in the air, and I saw his eyes flicker with something: regret, guilt, shame, maybe all of it at once. His lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I watched him, desperate for him to open up, to tell me everything. The silence between us stretched again, thick and heavy. "I was afraid," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "Afraid of losing you, afraid of what it would mean for us, afraid of facing it myself." I sat there, my heart aching as I listened to him. Afraid of facing it himself, afraid of losing me. Those words cut deep, deeper than anything he had ever said before. I didn't know what to say. How could I respond to that? How could I argue with fear when I had lived with my own for so long? I pulled my hand away from his, and for the first time, I felt the distance between us stretch too far to bridge. The connection that had always been there, the unspoken bond that had kept us close, even during the toughest times, was slipping away, thread by thread. "I don't understand, Jack," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "We've been through so much together. All those years, all those memories. How could you hide this from me?" Jack looked down at the table, his hands still clenched tightly in his lap. His voice trembled when he spoke again. "I didn't know how to tell you, Sarah. I didn't know how to say it, because I didn't even understand it myself. I spent my whole life pretending, trying to fit into this life I thought I was supposed to have. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And I didn't want you to see me like this." Like this, the words stung more than I expected. Like what? What was he now? And what did it mean for the life we had built together? What did it mean for me, for us? I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head. The room felt suffocating, and I needed space to think, to process. I couldn't do it here, not sitting across from him, with everything still hanging in the air between us. "I need some time," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt strange coming from my lips, but I couldn't think of anything else to say. "I need time to think." Jack's eyes darkened, and I could see the pain in them. But he didn't argue. He didn't fight me. He just nodded, as if he had been expecting this. "I understand," he said, his voice low and rough. "Take all the time you need, Sarah. I'm here. I'll wait. But please, don't give up on us." The words hit me harder than I expected. Don't give up on us. How could I not want to? How could I look at him now and not feel the sting of everything he had kept from me? But the truth was, I couldn't just walk away. Not yet. The history, the years we had spent together, it was too much to simply throw away. I had loved him with everything I had. I couldn't deny that. But I didn't know what love looked like anymore. Not when the man I had loved seemed like a stranger sitting in front of me. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky beneath me. I needed space. I needed to breathe. The house that had once felt like home now felt foreign to me. I couldn't stay here, not with the tension between us, not with the weight of what I had just learned. "I'll be in the living room," I said quietly, my voice soft, as I turned to leave. Jack didn't stop me. He didn't say anything more. I walked away. The echo of my footsteps in the hallway, somehow louder than everything that had come before. The house felt empty now, even though he was still here, just on the other side of the walls. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how I was going to find my way through this. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just forget what I had learned. Not now. Not ever. I sank down on the couch in the living room, my mind spinning, my heart aching. I had always prided myself on knowing who Jack was, but now I wasn't so sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. And as I sat there, trying to process everything, I realized that the hardest part wasn't knowing the truth. It was trying to figure out what to do with it. The silence of the house felt oppressive as I sat in the living room, lost in my thoughts. The minutes stretched on like hours, my mind too busy to settle, but not focused enough to make sense of anything. I kept replaying the conversation with Jack in my mind, over and over again. His words, the way he looked at me, his fear, his guilt, kept swimming in front of my eyes, refusing to let me go. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers for all the years of silence the hidden truth. But the anger felt distant. It felt almost too simple, too easy. And I knew deep down that this wasn't just about anger. It was about betrayal, yes, but it was also about loss, about losing something I never realized was slipping through my fingers until it was too late. The weight of the truth hung over me, and with it came a flood of questions I couldn't answer. What do I do now? Where do I go from here? How do you rebuild a life when you've just found out that the foundation was never what you thought it was? I glanced at the clock. Jack had been in the kitchen when I left, and now the quiet of the house felt more like a void. Something to be filled with the noise of our words, the hurt of our conversation. But I wasn't ready for that yet. I couldn't face him. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my phone, the familiar weight of it in my hand, strangely grounding. I opened up my messages, scanning through the texts, but none of them felt real anymore. The words felt hollow, disconnected from the chaos I was feeling inside. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Comfort, maybe. Something to make sense of all of this. I scrolled through a few more messages before I stopped on one from my sister, Claire. She'd always been a good listener, the kind of person who would let me ramble without judgment. But even as I read her words, they felt distant. I'm here if you need to talk. The kind of message that would have been comforting before this. But now, it felt like a reminder of how alone I was in all of this. Even the people closest to me didn't know what I was going through. I put the phone down beside me, taking a deep breath, and looked around the room. The living room was warm, familiar. The place where we'd spent so many evenings, talking about our days, laughing, sharing quiet moments together. Now, it felt like a stage, and I was the only one left in the spotlight, performing a role I wasn't sure I understood. A creak of the floorboards broke through the stillness. It was Jack, standing just outside the living room. I didn't need to look to know it was him. I could feel the weight of his presence, his uncertainty pressing against the walls, filling the space between us. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, waiting for me to acknowledge him. I didn't move. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice soft, almost pleading. "I don't want to pressure you, but I'm here. When you're ready to talk, I'm ready to listen." The words hit me harder than I expected. There was something so raw in his tone, so vulnerable, that I couldn't ignore it. He wasn't hiding behind his walls anymore. The man I had known, this confident, strong man, was gone, replaced by someone who was completely exposed. I didn't know how to process it. I felt a pang in my chest. How had we gotten here? How had I not seen the cracks that were starting to form in our marriage? Or had they always been there, hidden beneath the surface? I stood up, my legs unsteady, my mind still racing. I didn't know if I could face him. I didn't know if I was ready to confront what this meant for us, for our future. But the truth was, I couldn't stay here either. The room, the house, everything felt suffocating. I needed to move. I needed space to think, to breathe. "I need some air," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be back." I didn't wait for him to respond. I just walked past him, careful not to touch him, afraid that if I did, I might crumble right then and there. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack by the door, pulling it on with trembling hands, and stepped outside. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting, but it was a welcome relief. The brisk air helped clear my head, even just for a moment. I walked down the driveway, my breath visible in the chill, the rhythm of my footsteps echoing in the quiet street. The world outside felt simpler. At least outside, I wasn't forced to face the weight of everything that had just been revealed to me. I didn't know how long I walked for. It could have been minutes, or it could have been hours. I didn't care. I just needed to move, to keep putting one foot in front of the other. The air burned my lungs, but it felt good. It felt real. My thoughts, still tangled, began to settle a little as the steady movement gave my mind something to focus on. What do I do now? That question still hung over me, like an unanswered prayer. I could feel the pain, the rawness of everything Jack had confessed. But I also felt something else. Something I couldn't quite identify. A part of me was angry, but another part of me wanted to understand. I wanted to know why. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he waited until everything was already breaking? I stopped walking and stood at the edge of the street, looking out at the dimming sky. I wanted answers, but I didn't know if I was ready to hear them yet. I didn't know if I could handle any more truth. And yet, deep down, I knew I had to. I couldn't let the question, "What now?" linger forever. Something had to change, but what? Could I still love the man I thought I knew? Or was I standing at the edge of something that could never be fixed? I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the chill of the evening air cutting through me, but I didn't move. The world around me seemed so distant, as if I were in a bubble, separated from everything else. My mind was racing, thoughts crashing into one another, none of them making sense. How do you fix something like this? Is it even possible? And deeper still, what does this mean for me? For us? I glanced back toward the house, but I didn't move. The lights in the windows were soft, familiar, but they now felt like an invitation to a world I no longer understood. I knew Jack was still inside, probably sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. I didn't have to ask. I could feel the weight of his presence, his uncertainty, as clearly as I could feel the cold air on my skin. A part of me wanted to go back inside, to face him, to confront the truth head on. But another part, something smaller, quieter, was terrified of what might happen if I did. What if things couldn't be fixed? What if all of this, everything I had known, everything I had built with Jack, was broken beyond repair? I didn't know how long I stood there, just breathing, trying to make sense of the storm swirling inside me. But as the dark sky grew heavier, something began to shift inside me. A quiet realization crept in. I couldn't keep running from this. I couldn't keep hiding out here in the cold, pretending that somehow the answers would just magically appear. I had to face it. I had to face him. With a deep breath, I turned and walked back toward the house. My footsteps slow, each one heavier than the last. The closer I got, the more I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. When I reached the front door, I paused for a moment, my hand resting on the doorknob. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but I knew I had no other choice. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house was still. Jack was sitting at the kitchen table, just as I had imagined. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his shoulders hunched, as if he was waiting for something. Waiting for me, maybe, or for the weight of everything to just disappear. I stood in the doorway, not sure what to say, not sure what I even wanted from him. I had come back, but part of me still wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive, if I could even understand what had just happened between us. "Jack," I said quietly, my voice steady but low, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say." He didn't look up at first, but when he finally did, I saw it. The fear, the vulnerability, the man who was just as lost in this as I was. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, something he always did when he was unsure of himself. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he finally said, his voice thick. "I should have told you. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I never meant to hurt you." His apology hung in the air, but it didn't bring me the comfort I thought it would. How could it? It wasn't just about the apology. It was about the years of silence, the years of pretending. It was about what had been hidden, buried beneath the surface, that had shaped everything between us. I don't know what to feel right now, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I don't know how to take this. You've been hiding something so important from me, Jack. Something that changes everything. I took a step forward, slowly moving closer to the table. I feel like I don't know who you are anymore. I thought I knew you. I thought I understood who we were together. But now, I stopped, struggling to find the words. Now, everything feels like it's falling apart. He stood up then, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, as if he was trying to offer me something. His remorse, his regret, maybe even his desperation. I know I've messed up. I know I failed you. But I still love you, Sarah. I've always loved you. And I never meant to hurt you. Not like this. I shook my head slowly, the words hanging in the air, too heavy to say, too difficult to take in. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't see. And I didn't know if I was ready to fall. I need time, Jack, I said, my voice breaking. I need time to think, to process everything. I can't just pretend like none of this matters. I understand, he said softly, his voice breaking with the same raw emotion I felt inside. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I'll wait. I'm not going anywhere. The room was quiet again, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. I wasn't sure what the next step was. I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were. But one thing was clear. Something had to change. I had to make a choice. Whether that choice was to walk away or to find a way forward, I didn't know. But it was mine to make now. I didn't say anything else. I just walked away, back toward the living room, where the weight of everything seemed to settle on me like a blanket. The quiet stretched between us, but it wasn't just the silence of the house. It was the silence of everything we hadn't yet said. The days that followed felt like a blur. I don't know how to explain it, but everything seemed muted, like the colors of the world had dimmed. The house felt empty, even though Jack was still there, going about his day, his presence no longer offering the comfort it once did. We both moved around each other with quiet caution, as if we were walking on eggshells, afraid of what might happen if we said the wrong thing. And yet, no one said anything more. I spent the next few days lost in my own thoughts, trying to piece together what I was supposed to do. The house, our life together, all of it was no longer the same. How could it be? I had learned something so deep, so personal about Jack, that I didn't know if I could ever look at him the same way again. His confession had been the kind of truth that didn't just change what you knew about someone, it changed everything. But as the days went by, I began to realize something. I couldn't run from this. I couldn't keep pretending like it didn't matter. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't stay suspended in this limbo, caught between the past and the future, not knowing which direction to take. And I couldn't ignore the part of me that still loved him. I love him, but did I love the man he truly was, or the version of him I had created in my mind? Was there a way to move forward, or was everything broken beyond repair? One evening, after a quiet dinner that we barely spoke through, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring at the TV that was on, but not even registering the images flickering across the screen. My mind was still racing, trying to process everything, still searching for some kind of clarity that just wouldn't come. "Sarah," Jack said from the doorway, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I turned my head slowly to look at him. He was standing there, his hands stuffed into his pockets, his gaze down, like he was afraid to meet my eyes. It was the same posture I had seen in him countless times before, but this time it felt different, vulnerable in a way I had never noticed. I've been thinking, he continued, his voice quiet but steady. And I know you need time. I understand that. But I also know I can't just sit here and do nothing. I can't sit by and watch you drift away. Not when I know what we've had, what we still have. His words felt like a lifeline, and yet they also felt like a reminder of everything we had lost. I wasn't ready for this conversation, but I knew it was time. Jack, I said softly, I don't know if I can go back to what we were. I don't know if I can just pick up where we left off. It's not that simple. He nodded, as if he already knew what I was going to say. His eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, hope, regret. But most of all, there was honesty. The same honesty he had been afraid to show me all these years. I'm not asking you to go back to what we were, he said. I don't want us to just go back to the way things were. I don't want you to pretend like everything is fine. I just want us to try. I just want to be honest with each other from now on. His words struck something deep inside me. Honesty. For years, I had believed our relationship was built on trust, on transparency. But the truth was, we hadn't been truly honest with each other for a long time. We had both been hiding things, me too, in my own way. Jack's secret had been the catalyst, the thing that broke the dam open. But maybe it wasn't just about him. Maybe we had both been living with secrets, living in the comfort of our routines, not questioning what lay beneath the surface. I stood up slowly, moving toward him. My heart was racing in my chest, but there was something else now. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something new, something stronger, something real. Jack, I said softly, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the way things were. But I think we can try to build something new, together, from here. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out tentatively. I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. I needed this, needed him to show me that we could try again, even if it wasn't going to be easy. I'm not asking for everything to be fixed overnight, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. But I need to see that we can be real with each other now. That we can be honest. That we're not just holding on to the past. He nodded again, and this time he reached for my hand. His touch was warm, familiar, and yet it felt different. There was an honesty in it, a rawness I hadn't felt from him before. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice filled with conviction. We'll figure it out together. And for the first time in days, I believed him. As I stood there with Jack, holding on to his hand, I realized something. No matter what had happened, no matter how much had been broken, there was still something worth fighting for. We weren't perfect. We weren't the same people we had been before. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something better. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what the future would look like. But I knew that together, we could figure it out, one step at a time. And that, for now, was enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write to the bell, and share your impressions of listening to this story in the comments. Thank you for watching.